Today we were going to look at stories of people finding their voice, finding authenticity, and discovering personal spirituality in a world too often filled with religious bigotry and secular cynicism. David Mixner was my guest for episode 5 of Seeking Context back on January 15th, 2021. As a pioneering gay rights and human rights activist for the last 50 years, David shares how a deep belief system underpinned his lifetime of public service, and how his faith has helped prevent him from succumbing to anger or bitterness in the face of discrimination.
I'm Irish Catholic, and I have a deep belief system. And my theological philosophy, which is principles and values and beliefs, are different from issues. Issues come and go. I can change my mind on climate change tomorrow. I can change my mind, and that's just because I got information that challenged my beliefs. But principles and values should never disappear or change. I had very strong principles about how I look at other individuals and love and the planet as we are guardians of the planet. And it came a lot from my faith. And I am a liberation theologist, which is Saint Romero of El Salvador was the father or the poster cardinal for liberation theology, which it sounds complicated, but it's real simple. I can describe it to you in one line. We are put on earth by God to do one thing, to serve and take care of others.
It's a good philosophy.
It's back in vogue because Pope Francis is a liberation theologist, whereas Benedict and John Paul try to put it out. And for 60 years, I have worked with that basic tenet underlying my life. I have a few things like that sentence. I have dedicated my life to living that sentence and have done so without fail. Sometimes very popular, right now, very popular, and sometimes viewed as a villain. Sometimes making huge mistakes, which I owe it up to, sometimes having great success. But there's an old quote by a physicist and a Nobel Prize winner for peace named Bertrand Russell. Old Bertie said, 3 passions, simple but overwhelmingly strong, have governed my life. The search for knowledge, the longing for love, and the unbearable pity for the suffering of others. And that's sort of been my life journey. It's been based on all of that. And it's taken me to places I didn't think I would go in human rights work in Africa, especially with the Dutch government. It's taken me to places that my values and principles and having to make decisions that would be viewed by courageous by others that I paid a heavy price for, such as going to jail. I couldn't work for 4 years because I was put on a blacklist by the Clinton administration for getting arrested. I was selling my wristwatches at pawn shops, literally, to pay my rent. It took everything I had in me to keep my faith, that this was part of the journey that I needed to be humble, to reflect. Mostly just a few of my friends were, but it wasn't courageous. Because you know what courage is? How I define courage? A lack of options. A jetliner falls in the water and passengers are trying to get to shore. Grown people dive in with their clothes on in very hazardous cases. In a second, the hell bugger. I say that person had no option if they were going to live with themselves or if they were a person of God.
Right.
So the things I did because I had run out of options.
But you persevered.
I have went through some very difficult times. I've been beaten a lot in my work for my beliefs, sometimes brutally. And I have been, like I said, viewed as the devil sometimes and viewed as a savior at times. What I am is just me.
Yeah.
And my personal life was every bit as important to me as my public life. Your friends love you. So they don't want something bad to happen to you. So when you decide that you have to exercise what they view as a risky venture for oneself or a courageous, in their mind, venture for oneself, they try to pull you back from that edge. out of love, but it's also makes everybody uncomfortable because the very reason to be on that edge is to bring people closer to that edge so they can see the sunsets for themselves. A lot of people want us, come up to me and say, David, you got to say this, or David, you got to say that. Senators, presidents have said that to me. And I have a very quick response all my life. I really appreciate the love that you're showing for me and the caring, but you don't have a vote. My life is a dictatorship of one. And I will be responsible for my failures, and I'll be willing to take a bow for my successes. But I can't allow my life, either publicly or privately, to become a place of the lower common denominator or consensus in order to feel safe and loved.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be willing to be shunned and unloved and comfortable in my personal beliefs as I am to accept praise.
I was just curious, there's so many, when you experience something like that, it's easy to understand how people walk away from the church and view the church as a force for evil, at least in the way they experience it. But that did not impact your personal convictions or faith.
I think organized religion to be one of the most dangerous things around in the wrong hands.
Mm-hmm.
And that is God's building, not an individual's building, not a group of individuals. And my relationship with God is one-to-one. And God wouldn't have made me who I am if that's not who he wanted me to be. Good and bad.
Amen.
And I've always been comfortable with that. I stopped going to organized services for a while. But with Pope Paul, I have started going back.
Mm-hmm.
But there's only one relationship that's important in that church, and that's my relationship with my God. And if someone objects to it, it's none of their business. If someone objects to me sitting there, I don't care. Again, they don't have a vote. If they get ugly because I'm allowed to worship in a particular building, that's their problem. That's the minister's problem, not my problem. I'm not doing anything wrong. I've come to worship my God. It's really important that we don't take on the charges, the accusations, the myths of our oppressors, mm-hmm. and start explaining why we're not that. The moment you start explaining, well, I'm not that person, or I'm not that kind of gay, or I'm not, that fat, that becomes the issue. All you do is end up explaining what you're not.
Right.
And we were created by God's grace, and we do not have to explain why he created me like I am. If they have a problem and can't understand the word of the God I worship, that's their problem. They don't have a vote. I respect it. I wouldn't take their right to say it away. I'm not that kind of person. I believe, if the Klan wants to march up the street, I couldn't disagree with more. I'd sit in to stop them from marching. I'd go to jail to stop them. But they have a right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
In peace.
2 months after my conversation with David Mixner, my producer Caden Runnels interviewed me about my own experience coming to terms with my sexuality as a Midwest kid growing up in a conservative town and a young adult navigating the ethical contradictions of the military's don't ask, don't tell policy when I was an F-15 pilot in the U.S. Air Force.
So a lot of what you do does surround about or encompass faith and religion. And then obviously it's a big part of your life, but other aspects of your life kind of could, in a way, not interfere, but, kind of clash heads a little bit of just like simple things of like who you love or you're attracted to. And I just wanted to know your stance or what your belief is on like sexuality affecting your faith or organized church or religion, how that affects you.
Well, for most of my adult life, I was probably an agnostic, if not, and I think certainly times I've been an atheist. And I don't think I rebelled against the church because of like their positions on same-sex marriage or you're being gay. I think I give people kind of a pass on that in terms of like what my experience is that, I grew up as a gay kid in Oakley, Kansas. I never really experienced any sort of discrimination because I didn't even know about it myself, right? It just didn't even seem like that was an option. That wasn't something I ever even really considered because I didn't understand it. There's no, as far as you can observe, there's no gay people in that community. There wasn't in the 70s and 80s anyway.
Right.
That would come out. I think if you were, you just moved away. And it just, you knew that that doesn't fit in that environment. And so it was never anything said, but it was like sort of obvious and explicit that that's morally wrong. And the church was sort of part of that, but it's what everybody was taught. And when I look back at my life and I realized that I wasn't able to come to terms with my own sexuality until I was 26 years old, and I did it after I had succeeded at every goal that I set. I got into the Air Force Academy, I got a master's degree, I got an F-15, and now I'm kind of at the top of my game. And then I finally said, oh, maybe I can do something for myself and not do something for other people. And it's not like I set out to do this, but looking back, I think I needed to prove myself. I needed to prove some sort of masculine identity in order to have the courage to acknowledge to myself and eventually to other people that I was different than the normal person. And so I give people a fair amount of time to come around and realize that, if you were taught that it was wrong and it's morally wrong and that the Bible says that it's an abomination and there's various things, some of the text of which has been changed in the last 100 years, that actually didn't reflect the language that was written in like the ancient scriptures. But if people were taught that it was wrong and that nobody challenged that, I kind of understand that, okay, that's what somebody taught you. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what God believes. Like, did God create people just to suffer, and then reject? Is it just your group that they act this only a certain way? And so my sort of approach to faith, and the reason that it's an important part of my life now, is because of all the research I did for this business. I spoke with ministers, lay leaders, my parents, lots of relatives, and I discovered that way more people than I knew were people of the faith. They had very strong convictions in their belief in a God. Some of them are very different versions, right? They believe a certain way, and finding out why they came to understand that is very interesting to me. And finding out for other friends why they rejected faith is really interesting, because I know people who have been very injured by the church. Matthew had a friend in high school or maybe early adult years that owned a gay bar and died in a car crash. And the Catholic Church would not let his family hold a funeral. And so that's extremely hurtful. And I can see why that experience would cause somebody to say, F you, Catholic Church. I don't have anything to do with you for the rest of my life. If your version of God is going to punish a family and exclude them from honoring their child who died, why would I want to be part of that, be associated with the God that you believe in? Right. If that's how he approaches me, then I guess I'm not going to believe in him, or he can just go off, And so I never had an experience like that. Some churches are accepting, some churches aren't. And, the church is a manifestation of people. Like, it's people interpreting scripture and deciding how they're going to practice. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the Spirit wants, right? There's hundreds of different interpretations. So I'm finding it very interesting to learn what people's experience are. And that in turn has caused me to, take a second look at, why why did I think I would be, why am I an atheist? What caused me to think that? And should I be revisiting these thoughts? Because the people that I interview who do have deep faith convictions are also, a lot of them, very sophisticated people. And I think, my experience with sort of the coastal elites, if you will, and the educated elites that I've been in context with a lot, I think there's this view of religious people as sort of backwards. They don't really get it. Like that's all fairy tales. And when you get to know people and that do have real strong faith convictions, they have a philosophical underpinning for it, and they also have personal sort of mystical experiences that inform them. They can't prove those things, but they are not saying them because they are dumb or backwards. They're saying them because of their faith has helped them, and they're very content, and it brings joy in their community, and they serve each other in ways that lift each other up. So it's been really, really interesting to interview people from so many different backgrounds. I kind of got off the track of like how I reconcile, but for me, I don't really have to reconcile the fact that some churches reject same-sex marriage or even gays at all to be part of their religion. And that's fine. If that's what you believe, it is possible. I can say it is possible that God created gay people and they are all going to burn in hell, because that's wrong. I don't think that's what he had, but I mean, God gets to do what he wants to do.
Right. I guess he has that power.
Choice on what the rules are. He set it up, and I do think that whatever the setup was, it is probably something that is universal. He set it up 1 billion years ago, and we're figuring it out as we go. But the fact that some organized religion has been used for very bad things, the Crusades, persecution, lots of religions have been treated women poorly, or completely ignored them, and certainly the LGBT community has been rejected by many. But that doesn't mean that God was intentionally doing that. That's people. And so I can separate those two.
Right.
And try and find out, well, what is there? Is there a universal,
truth
sort of truth? Right.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Or not. Or is it all, are we all fooling ourselves? Well, did we invent this idea in our own heads? There's some people that think that. And I like exploring it because we only have so much time, and then you're dead for billions of years. So if you can figure out anything about it, you got to figure it out now, if that's really what happens too. I think it's worthwhile exploring either way.
Right. That's just funny. You got about, a positive number of maybe 80 years to figure it out, and then it's over. So
Right.
You can try your best.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of teachings in the faith that thinks you have a lot more time than that. In this body, right?
Exactly.
You don't have that much time. So I think it's a worthwhile thing to explore. 2 months after my conversation with Caden, on Mother's Day 2021, I interviewed St. Louis musician Celia Shacklett. On Easter Sunday this week, as she has done every year for the last 10 years, Celia will be performing Jesus Christ Superstar Shadow Puppet Spectacular. This performance, which she describes as Resurrection for the Rest of Us, is an interactive experience in which Celia invites attendees to create their own shadow puppets to display while the 1973 movie is projected on the big screen. In this moment from our 2021 interview, Celia describes what it was like growing up in the small town of Oakley, Kansas, discovering that there was something different about herself. But so what was your experience as, a gay kid growing up in a small town like this?
Well, I was sort of like, I didn't know I was gay. I mean, maybe somewhere in there I had a clue, and I think I overcompensated a lot. I was super religious. I think I thought maybe I could force this thing that was different about me or that was wrong about me. Maybe I thought I could kind of force it out if I had something else that was different about me. Maybe if I was super religious or a kind of a spiritual leader to my peers, maybe I wouldn't have to worry about this thing that I felt like might set me apart, from from my peers. Late in high school, I started to get it that, oh, okay, I didn't really know, and you know what I mean. Back then in the 80s and 90s, I didn't know any gay people. I had no adult role models at all. Right. Or, but I do know that I'd see some women out there that I'd be like, what is going on there? I want to be like her, right?
Mm-hmm. You saw that in this community, or like when you went to college, or
kind of traveling around, or just as a kid, you see people, and I couldn't put my finger on it. It was something different, and it was queer. Somebody that was a queer person, in whatever way that was. I think I'd see that, and I wanted it. And honestly, Justin, when we were kids, I loved you and looked up to you so much, and I think this happened to me with a few kids growing up, that later on in life, I found out that they were gay too. And I was like, oh, that was it. Of course that was, right. But I just remember, and it happened a lot with boys like you, where I thought I had a crush on you, but I didn't. That wasn't it at all. I had like a gay crush on you. Right.
Yeah. Well,
and so it all became more clear when I left Oakley. I think I did I didn't want to be rejected. And my older brother, who's not gay, was bullied throughout high school because he was a piano player. He didn't play football, and he had some, people in his world that were probably not the sweetest people. Mm-hmm. And so he ran into some real problems. They thought he was gay, or that's how they teased him. That's the angle they took to tease him. And it really was, I think, frightening for him. And so I think I saw that in my own way and didn't want to rock the boat. My childhood, though, was so great. I feel like I was really loved and supported by the kids in my world and the grown-ups in my world. I didn't feel like I was going to have any problems as long as I kind of didn't act totally gay.
Right. Did you have trouble reconciling your spiritual and religious convictions that you were embracing early on with your own sexuality?
Sure I did. I did a lot of searching for a long time. I went through several years where I told everybody that would give me half a chance that I was an atheist. I think I just wanted to be punk about it and be like, oh, I just don't believe in God. But I think more than that, it was my sort of rejection of how religion had sort of given me a lot of baggage that I had to slough off. You kind of grow up thinking that the church won't accept you, or thinking that it is wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And you gotta work through that. You gotta kind of look for what's real. What is my faith? What is my spirituality versus what's the dogma or the indoctrination that I encountered growing up. And my church was so loving. I really felt at home in my church. In fact, I took on a lot of ownership of my youth group. I wanted to be the song leader in youth group. I felt like it was an important role for me to help try to glue us together by singing together. I mean, I loved those people. And I didn't feel rejected by it, but I do know that religion has been something that I had to personalize quite a bit to like maintain my faith and to have a faith that works for me. That's a practical Christianity that like teaches me how to treat people and puts love above all else. And like, that wasn't necessarily how it was always presented to me, or maybe it was presented to me like that, but the nuts and bolts of it often looked different, right? It often looked like, what's going on there? That's a really different look than loving one another, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of exclusionary versions of Christian organized religion in this community and others.
Yeah, I mean it's endemic to religion. It's not just in Oakley or in small towns. Religion is just another tool. I think people Sundays, but I appreciate kind of the value that my faith gives to my work. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't feel like I'm not anti-church. I just don't attend. I do feel like I apply a certain kind of spirituality to most of my activities.
Well, and you perform a rock opera.
I perform a rock opera.
I mean,
about Jesus.
Right.
And, I mean, Christmas, all this stuff has maybe not if religious undertones, sort of a religious root, I'm into it. I'm into love. That's a big deal.
Another Seeking Context guest who is genuinely into love was Jessica Karraker, who runs an animal rescue called Wolfstone Ranch in Farmington, Missouri. In my conversation with Jessica at her home on June 27, 2021, we discussed how her mission to help animals felt like a calling from the sacred, and how a debate with friends led her to eventually come out as a spiritually based organization, despite concerns that a public acknowledgement of her beliefs might feel off-putting to others in a secular society. Well, so on your website, and I know you personally, you have, this is a spiritually based, your mission is spiritually based. And so I'm curious, like, what is your own personal spirituality? Like, how would you define that? And how has that affected your approach to founding this organization and caring for animals?
Very much so. First of all, since I founded Wolfstone Ranch, and I felt it, first of all, it came to me that I needed to do this as a revelation one day. It felt very much like a calling. It felt like the sacred was saying, I am asking you to do this. And I've never had that experience before in my life per se, but I was raised as a Christian. When I left home, I left high school, I kind of left all of that behind, and that wasn't until I hit 40 and had been through some bad relationships and a divorce and some other ways that life had kind of crashed for me, that I said, what is not working for me in my life? And I said, I threw out the baby with the bathwater. I threw out totally living a life of integrity with no compromises, with no rationalizations here or there, and said, that's what it's all about. I came back, but also I lived in California by then. Even as I came, I can relate to the evangelicals in feeling a born again kind of a feeling, because that's what it was. It was like, you've got to have that underpinning. And if you're not religious or even consider yourself spiritual, you can have it, as far as I'm concerned, you can be secular, but if you have that real commitment to living a life of integrity, to honesty and authenticity and kindness, it can be done. It doesn't have to be spiritual, but on the other hand, spirituality opens you up to so much even more, what's beyond the five senses. I believe that there's something much greater than us, and you don't have to call it God, the universe, or this or that. It's just, I think we access, I think for one thing that the divine is in all of creation, in each of us, and when we open our minds and our hearts to the possibility of the sacred, then we access all of that is nameless, and you don't want to put a definition on it because you're restricting it. So to me, I call myself spiritually based because I'm comfortable with the language. I'm comfortable with that. But also, we live in a growingly secular society, and I don't want those people to feel pushed away. Mm-hmm. And I want them to feel that if they can put up with my God talk, so to speak, then we'll be able to get along, because if you want to live a life of meaning and purpose, and that you're here for more than just having a good time and being a person who wins as opposed to being in a dog-eat-dog world, I want to make sure I'm on top, then we're coming from the same place.
And I read one of your newsletters where you talked about, like, I felt like you were sort of like, you're like, okay, I'm coming out. This is a spiritual organization. Right. But you had friends that were like, I wouldn't do that. Let's just keep this secular, and you have your beliefs, and you don't have to have this overtly spiritual sort of flavor, or however you present the organization. So do you think you made the right call?
Oh my God. I absolutely love it. I don't know how I never came up with that myself. Coming out. That is what it exactly felt like. And coming out is always the right thing.
Right. But you can be honest.
Once you feel freed from that. And it's like, if people aren't going to relate to this, okay, maybe they never will, but in my authenticity, I'm going to find my people. I'm going to find my kindred spirits. I'm going to find the people that we can build this community. Yeah, I love that.
Right. But like this is something, I guess your spiritual feelings is something that you did really discover about yourself late in life, even though there was a foundation. Like,
Yeah. I graduated high school and I went off to college, and I wanted to be like the Beatles, who they were the ones that I was first fell in love with as a teen girl, and then I moved to Los Angeles to be a rock star. Like I said, I wanted to then, when I made it, I was going to start an animal rescue, but I certainly quit thinking about the ways I'd been raised. And, then you get into relationships, just as an example, you get into relationships where you're not honoring yourself, getting involved with alcoholics or somebody who is on drugs, and then you're allowing yourself to be verbally abused. Fortunately, I was never physically abused. And these are some of the things when I did crash and burn around 40, it was like, what's not working in your life? Oh, when you threw out all the Bible as an example of a holy book, there are many from many religions. The wisdom in them is people who took the time to delve into the mind and heart of human beings. That's the way we're made. Mm-hmm. And so the Bible is talking about that. And if you throw out the rules, you're going to hurt yourself and others too. And that's kind of where it all came from. Because I always had the heart to be an activist. I always had compassion for animals and a lot of other people. Not necessarily for people that don't have compassion for animals. That's a harder one for me. But it was very much, I'm going to live a life that it is uncompromising in my commitment to what I believe the sacred is calling all of us to.
In these moments of light with Celia, David, and Jessica, the common theme that emerged for me was the importance of listening to your heart and being true to yourself. I loved how Jessica said in such straightforward terms, coming out is always the right thing to do. When we hide our true selves in order to conform to the norms or rules of a group, we start to build relationships based on a character that we think other people need us to play. But is that really what we want for our friends and for ourselves? Do you want to be friends with people who are playing a role? Or do you want to be friends with people who are real, who reveal the depths of their humanity in a way that invites you to be yourself as well? When we can be authentic with ourselves, with our family, and our communities, we can build meaningful relationships built on trust, empathy, and love. I'd like to close by sharing a song Celia co-wrote with a 6-year-old boy named E.J. Funny, titled, appropriately, I Love Myself.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yes. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yes. I love myself. I love myself. I'm talented. I'm lucky. Oh yes. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yes. I'm talented, I'm lucky, and most of all, I'm cool. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yes. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yes.